Let's get reaction now from the Dissident Project founder, Daniel Di Martino, who was born and raised in Venezuela, and we should emphasize, came here legally with his family, which is something we'll get into at the end of this. But first of all, it's great news. They got the plane. They got the jet. He wasn't able to get away with it. I understand they got some help from the Dominican Republic, which was good, and there might be about 15 more sanctions coming to Maduro officials. But, what took him so long?
Well, I think at least the good news is that Maduro is getting a taste of his own medicine. He likes to take people's property. I think it's time that the U.S. takes his property away.
As a socialist, he's used to doing that, yeah.
But, you know, it's a shame that the only thing we can do still is this, when Chevron is operating still in Venezuela, and it represents over 10% of the GDP of the country.
Wow.
And that is allowed by the Biden administration. The administration has not even arrested people related to this, related to other cooperation with the Maduro regime. There are foreigners who live in other countries who cooperate with Maduro and are allowed to come to the U.S., and there's no sanctions on them. So there needs to be done a lot more.
And I'm just wondering if the Biden-Harris administration is doing enough, because they clearly were flirting, at least in the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, flirting with the Maduro regime, trying to persuade him that oil had a lot to do with it. They were clamping down on our oil production, but they wanted to bring in more oil from abroad. Is that one reason that they were slow in really pressing harder on Maduro?
Well, initially what happened was that the war in Ukraine broke out, and so Biden thought that the best way to substitute the Russian oil was substitute it with Venezuelan oil, when in reality it should have been American oil, right? Imagine if I told you there's one policy that could reduce CO2 emissions, that could promote democracy, and that would create American jobs. And that policy is actually increasing American oil production.
Yeah,
and
or
yet,
certainly natural gas production.
Natural gas too, but even oil, because Venezuela's oil company is
filthy.
the company with the most oil spills in the planet right now.
Yes.
Yet, why do we keep importing Venezuelan oil?
I once flew over an oil production area in Venezuela, and I was told by the guy who had the plane that this used to be one of the most beautiful spots in the world, and it was just, you know, mile after mile after mile. It took about 10 minutes to fly over the whole thing. It was filthy, and this is how they're cleaning energy, by importing more from the filthiest oil producer. And we should mention also that in the old days, before it was nationalized by the government, PDVSA, the name of the Venezuelan oil company, was a relatively decent, efficient company, but Chavez put his own people in there and changed the whole thing around, right?
Yeah, I mean, remember, Venezuela not only has the largest oil reserves on the planet, but it has many natural resources. It used to be one of the richest countries in the world. And it was these socialist policies of price controls, of nationalizations, of expansion of government that are also being promoted in the United States that really bankrupted our country and led to the largest refugee crisis on the planet. The largest refugee crisis in world history that has not been caused by a war is Venezuela.
Wow. Wow. And
8 million.
Is it possible that another wave is coming? Because I understand the situation gets even more dire by the day there.
Yeah, well, there was a poll right before the fraudulent election of last month in Venezuela, and it said that about 1 million people were ready to go in the next 6 months if Maduro is not out of office. Think about that. 1 million more people, hundreds of thousands of them probably will come to the United States. Yeah,
well, particularly with the open doors, which leads me, again, you are a shining example of the kind of immigration that America needs in terms of hardworking and not going on a government dole. But we see a lot of people coming. We just got this, the New York Post headline today is 3 out of 4 arrested in Midtown, a migrant. Crime and again, time and again. The number of migrant crimes is growing so much that it's actually 75% of the crime that we get in the U.S. right now. Well, at least in New York City.
Yeah, at least in Midtown. And this is the consequence of both the failed policies in immigration controlling the border by the federal government, but also the failed policies of the city. Remember, the city is the one that chose to house these migrants at taxpayer dollars and put them all together, all the single men together in one shelter. It's like a ticking time bomb. Like, who in their right mind thought we're going to pay for the housing of all the illegal immigrants? We're going to house all the men together.
Health care and of course debit cards as well. And you see that, by the way, this is the housing project in Aurora, Colorado. So it's not just New York, it's all over the country. Daniel, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Come again quickly.
Thank you.
Good to see you. We'll have more Cavuto Coast to Coast right after this.
Run, baby!